Hey guys, welcome back to a new tutorial on Spring. So today we are going to learn how to retrieve the variables from property files so that if we specify any variable in a property file and we want to get the values of that particular variable, how we can do it in Spring. And also we are going to learn on something very interesting which is known as Spring Beans Lifecycle, right? So stay tuned, there's a lot of exciting stuff we are going to reveal today, right? So if we look into the previous code, you are already familiar with this code as of now. For the last 4 to 5 sessions we have been discussing on this. So in this particular session we have seen that we are loading the Spring container, we are loading the Spring Beans, and we are accessing the different methods. Once we get that particular bean, we are accessing the different methods of that particular class, and finally we are closing the context. Now if we go into the application context, which is actually the container for that particular Spring, because this is the file which gets loaded initially. So in this, if I go into user, see, I have hard coded the values for username and password, like admin and password, which comes up when we run this piece of code, right? But if I want that this values should be fetched from the property file, how we are going to do that? Okay, so once again, let's go with the structure which is created by the Maven project. So it has that src main java, inside which we are having all the piece of java code, the different packages and the java code that we have specified. Okay, and this is the application context, which should be within the class path, which should be preferable inside the source directory. There is something which is called src main resources. This particular folder normally is used, this resources folder is normally used to hold any property file or any configuration files for a particular project, say application properties, or like a jdbc.property, something like that. So let's create a property file inside the resource, and we'll show you that how we are going to retrieve that particular value of that particular from that particular property file and use it in our java code. Okay, so we go here and we go to other. Okay, because we need to create a file, and the file will be a property file, right? So we selected file, we click on next, and I use the name as application dot properties, right? So I'm setting it to be finished, so till the time it gets loaded. So application.property file, those of you who are well known of this property file, you must be aware that it always hold the value in a key value pair. Like, say for an example, user ID equals to root, and say password equals to, say, password. So it's always a key value pair. So here user ID is the key and root is the value, password is the key, and this password is the value, right? We shouldn't put any username, password in a property file, but just for this particular demo purpose, or particular in order to make you understand how we are going to retrieve this values, I'm just specifying it, and it should have been encoded format right now, or it should be encrypted format. Normally, if you are at all writing the password or specifying a password and user ID in a property file. Okay, so let's move ahead. So once we have specified in this property file, I need to go into the application context, and I need to first delete this username and password, and I'll use the sign which is normally being used in Spring in order to fetch the values from property file. It's a dollar and curly braces. Same for here, dollar and curly braces, right? So I think I put it the name as user ID, and this is normal password, right? So I save it. Do you think it's gonna work? No, it won't, because how Spring will understand that from where I need to get the values of user ID and password, which is a file I need to refer to, right? Yeah, it's quite unknown for the Spring to understand, right? So there is a new tag that I'm going to introduce today, okay? That is called context, okay? And you find there are certain things like annotation, config, component, scan, mbin, export. So a lot of this annotations, or a lot of this, different tags we'll be talking about later, but as of now we'll be only concentrated on property placeholder. This is something that we need to understand, okay? Context, property, placeholder, okay? And over here what we are going to do is there is another part which is called location, okay? So you are trying to tell the Spring that, hey Spring, I have a property file which I have placed in this particular location. So here what you need to do is you just need to provide class path and provide the provide the file name, right? If it is application.properties, so we have created application.property. If it would have been any other name, say jdbc.properties, then we should have mentioned this, okay? So this is how we are trying to tell this Spring container that, boss, when you are trying to load this particular beans file, or when you're trying to load this application context.xml, ensure that if there is any dollar curly braces, that means it is referring to the data which needs to be fetched from the property file, and where the property file is, it's there in class path with the name as application.properties. Clear? Now let's go to client test and let's okay, and let's run this piece of code. Right, so we have seen, right? So it is root and password right now. So if I'm trying to make a change to this property files, instead of root and password, let me make it system and root 123, and then if I'm going to run the same piece of code, we'll see the username has been changed to root 123 and password is also system. So right now my point to make you understand over here is, instead of hard coding it in application.context or the main container Spring of the file, what we are trying to do is we are trying to fetch the values from the property files. Right now let's learn something new, which is known as bean lifecycle. So when we define any bean over here, it comes up with two additional properties rather, okay? So let's say, for an example, let me take this data service bean. So this data service bean, we have a property, and there are something like, when a bean gets created, we can have a certain init method for it, and when we means at the time of initializing, if we want the Spring to do something, we can specify it in the bean itself. And similarly, it may or before the Spring beans get destroyed by the container, if we want any functions to get performed, we can do it easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm just trying to call init method, okay? So I write like init method, and if I write something like destroy method, it is right. It's like or let's make the method as cleanup method, I made a small mistake. It's actually instead of a tag, it should be a part of the beans itself. So it's like we need to, so within that bean we need to specify like init method, and same for the case of destroy method, right? So the next question which may come up to your mind is where do I need to specify this particular methods, where? So it should be there in the data service class. So if I go to data service class, I need to specify two methods like public. The return type can be anything, but preferably we will go with void, and say I go with init method, okay, and I write something like, it can be anything, any variables you want to ensure, or any such thing. It depends up to you what you want to specify. Okay, so hello, I am inside init method, right? So similarly, I'll create a new method called public void cleanup method. So as I said, the return type can be anything, okay, the content can be anything, but we always need to ensure that the method name, like init method, cleanup method, okay, this method names should be the same. If it is different, it's gonna function differently. Okay, so if I write inside cleanup method, right? So let us run this piece of code once again. Right, so if you see, when the bean got initialized, okay, in the data service one, what it said was, initially it's saying hello, I am inside init method, because once your bean gets initialized, it's running our init method first. Then what's happening is it's getting the user, it's registering that particular thing. It's showing us in this line number 26, where we have said like we are printing all users. There itself, it's kind of printing the username and the password. And then when we are closing the context, it's before we close that context, it is calling our destroy method. So it's kind of, so if we want to process any information, if we want to process any data or any other thing, what we can do is, or before the container destroys the bean, or during the initialization of the bean, if you want any action to be performed, that can easily be done. So I think we are good up to this, that we can use init method and destroy method and perform the activities that we would like to do. We have retrieved the properties from the property file. So stay tuned for more videos, a lot of interesting things coming up. We'll be learning a lot of stuff. So till then, happy learning. Have a nice evening. Thank you so much.